There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, that happens when a person begins to change. Not a loud change, not a dramatic announcement, just a decision made in private to take their life more seriously, to wake up earlier, to stop tolerating things that diminish them, to begin building something real. And if you watch carefully, something strange happens in the days and weeks that follow. The people around them begin to shift. Not all of them, but some. And those some will tell you everything you need to know about the nature of human weakness. Let us talk about that, honestly and without comfort, because the truth here is not flattering to everyone who hears it. Weak people, and I use that word not as an insult, but as a precise description of a psychological condition. Weak people build their sense of safety in sameness. They find comfort in environments where everyone around them stays in place, where no one grows too fast, no one asks too much of themselves, no one makes choices that force others to look in the mirror. There is an unspoken contract in many social environments, and that contract says we will all remain here, together, at this level, and no one will make anyone else feel inadequate by choosing something more. It is a fragile agreement, and discipline breaks it. The moment someone in that environment decides to change, to genuinely change, not to talk about it, not to plan endlessly, but to actually begin the work, that contract cracks. Because discipline is not neutral, it is not quiet. Even when it is practiced in silence, it speaks. It speaks through the absence of complaints. It speaks through the structure of a day. It speaks through the calm refusal to participate in things that once consumed time and energy. And awake people hear that silence, and they feel accused by it. Not because you have said anything, but because your actions have implicitly asked a question that no one comfortable with mediocrity wants to answer. Why am I not doing this too? You did not do anything to them. You simply stopped doing something to yourself. That question, unspoken, is unbearable to some. And when a question becomes unbearable, people do not answer it. They destroy the thing that is asking it. They label it. They mock it. They reframe the person who has changed as someone who has become difficult, cold, arrogant, or strange. They say, quietly at first and then louder, that the person has changed, and they mean it as a condemnation, as though growth itself were a betrayal. You need to understand this dynamic completely, because it will happen to you, or perhaps it already has. When you begin setting high standards for yourself, people will call you rigid. When you begin protecting your time with seriousness, people will call you distant. When you stop participating in conversations that go nowhere, in habits that drain you, in relationships that ask everything and offer nothing, people will say you have become selfish. When you choose 8 hours of sleep over late-night distraction, when you choose books over noise, when you choose discomfort over ease, when you stop laughing at things that waste you, some people will feel abandoned. Not because you left them, but because you left a version of yourself they were comfortable with. And here is the hard truth, delivered without cruelty but without softness either. That is their problem, not yours. This is not permission to become cold. This is not an invitation to arrogance. A truly disciplined person does not look down on others. They are too busy building themselves to waste that kind of energy. What I am saying is simpler and harder than arrogance. I am saying that your growth does not require anyone's approval. That the most powerful thing a person can do in a world saturated with opinions and social pressure and the endless demand to explain yourself is to simply continue, quietly, without defense, without justification, without the need to be understood by people who have not earned the right to. Evaluate your choices. The disciplined mind does not seek applause from people who avoid difficulty. Weak people seek approval because approval is the currency of the insecure. It is the substitute they have found for genuine self-respect. And because they spend their lives collecting that currency, they assume that everyone operates the same way. So when a disciplined person does not seek their validation, does not shrink their standards to fit the group, does not apologize for their focus, the weak person person interprets this not as self-sufficiency, but as contempt. They feel looked down upon, not because you looked down, but because they instinctively looked up and found that the gap had grown. There are specific habits and mindsets that separate the person who builds themselves from the person who merely watches others build. Let us walk through them with precision, because this is the practical heart of everything being said here. The disciplined person sets personal standards that are not negotiated with the crowd. They do not ask for permission to expect more from themselves. They understand that standards are not punishments. They are architectural decisions about the kind of life being constructed. A person who refuses to set standards lives in a structure with no walls, wondering why everything feels unstable. The standard is the wall. The discipline is the material it is built from, and you do not ask the neighborhood whether your walls are too high. The disciplined person protects their focus with a ferocity that others will misread as antisocial behavior. Focus is the rarest resource in the modern world, because the modern world has been engineered specifically to fragment it. Every interruption, every notification, every invitation to be distracted, every social obligation that masquerades as connection but is actually just noise, all of it is an attack on the one thing that separates people who build from people who drift. Protecting focus is not rudeness. It is sanity. It is the basic recognition that your attention is yours, that it is finite, and that where you direct it determines what your life becomes. The disciplined person works quietly, not because they are hiding, but because the work itself is the point. There is a cultural obsession with performance, with the announcement of effort, with showing the world not just results, but the entire process of arriving at them. The disciplined mind understands that announcing your intentions disperses the psychological energy that should be directed into the work itself. They let results speak, eventually. And in the silence between effort and outcome, weak people who have nothing to show and therefore must constantly narrate their intentions interpret that silence as aloofness. It is not. It is simply the dignity of a person who does not need witnesses to do what is right. And finally, the disciplined person refuses to shrink. There is an enormous social pressure, subtle and persistent and rarely stated directly, to make yourself smaller so that others can feel large. To dim your focus so that others are not reminded of their own distraction. To soften your standards so that others can feel comfortable with their absence of standards. To speak of your goals with self-deprecating humor so that no one feels accused by your ambition. The disciplined person recognizes this pressure for exactly what it is, a request made by weakness, on behalf of weakness, in the interest of weakness, and they decline it, not aggressively, not with announcement. Simply and completely. Now let us talk about what strong people do not do, because this is where the maturity of real growth becomes visible. Criticism from someone who has not built is not information, it is a symptom. Let us talk about identity transformation, because this is what growth actually is, beneath all the habits and routines and strategies. It is the slow, difficult, non-linear process of becoming someone different, not performing a different character, but genuinely becoming one. Changing the beliefs you hold about what you are capable of. Changing the standards you apply to yourself. Changing the story you tell about who you are and what your life is for. This transformation is real, and it is profound. And it is also the thing that most frightens the people around you who have not chosen it. The villain of a weak story, or the architect of a strong life. That is the actual choice being presented here. Not in those words, never in those words. In the daily, undramatic private choice between the easy thing and the right thing. Between the comfortable thing and the demanding thing. Between the version of yourself that fits and the version of yourself that you are genuinely capable of becoming. The villain of a weak story or the architect of a strong life. Choose with full awareness of what each decision costs. So here is the realization, stated plainly at the end of all of this. If you have become, in the perception of some people, the villain of their story, Take a moment to examine what that means carefully. Not with shame, not with satisfaction either, just with honesty. Ask yourself, what did I do to earn this characterization? Did I harm someone? Did I abandon someone who genuinely needed me? Did I act from contempt or cruelty or pride? If yes, then the characterization may deserve attention. Examine it. Correct what needs correcting. Growth is not immunity from genuine error. But if the answer is no, if the answer is that you simply began to take your life seriously, that you began to protect your time with respect, that you began to hold yourself to standards that made other people's absence of standards visible by contrast, that you refused to shrink, that you chose the work over the noise, the future over the comfort, the demanding path over the easy one. If that is the sum of your crime, then the verdict of weakness is not something you owe a response to. It is simply the sound that weakness makes when it encounters something it cannot slow down. Let it make that sound. Let them have their verdict. Let the story they tell about you be whatever story they need it to be. And then, without defense, without bitterness, without the need for their understanding or their approval or their revision of the character they have assigned you, continue. Simply and completely continue. Because the work does not care about the narrative. The work only cares about being done. Become disciplined. Become focused. Become someone whose standards cannot be negotiated downward by the discomfort of people who have chosen not to build. Become, if you must, the villain in the small story of those who preferred stagnation to truth. Because the alternative, the life of permanent smallness, maintained for the sake of others who would not even notice the sacrifice you made to protect their comfort, that is a cost too high to pay. Live the life that requires something from you. Live the one that is hard to explain. Live the one that makes the comfortable uncomfortable. Not because you intend it, but because you refuse to apologize for choosing growth in a world that profits from your settling. You do not owe weakness an explanation. You do not owe weakness your time, your attention, your compromise, or your restraint. You owe yourself the one life you have been given, lived at the full depth of what you are capable of. That is not arrogance. That is the only responsible answer to the question of what to do with a finite life. And if that makes you the villain of weak people's stories, then perhaps that is simply because you refuse to live a weak life. Comment below. Built different.